In Game of Thrones, the Manderlys were a minor northern house not given much screen time. They were mentioned by Ramsay Bolton and Davos Seaworth.
We don't need every house in the north. The Umbers, the Manderlys, and the Karstarks command more soldiers than all the other houses combined.
The most powerful houses in the north are the Umbers, the Karstarks, and the Manderlys.
But they remained neutral during the Battle of the Bastards. We did see glimpses of their lord, Wyman Manderly, as Jon Snow was proclaimed king in the north in Winterfell. In the A Song of Ice and Fire books, however, the Manderlys of White Harbor are one of the most powerful and influential houses in the north. They're also one of the most fascinating, since they aren't even native to the region. They're refugees. Over the centuries, they developed a deep, unbreakable loyalty to House Stark, and rode south with King Robb during the War of the Five Kings. Lord Wyman's son Wendell died alongside the king at the Red Wedding, and Lord Wyman has secretly been plotting revenge against the Boltons, and may even be involved in a grand northern conspiracy. Wyman Manderly is a northern version of Doran Martell, who sits quietly in Sunspear waiting for the perfect moment to take revenge against their enemies, the Lannisters. In The Winds of Winter, the Martells may be instrumental in removing the Lannister power in King's Landing with Aegon Targaryen. Up north, Wyman Manderly will likely be instrumental in a Stark restoration. But which Stark will it be? The young Rickon, growing wild on Skagos? Or resurrected Jon Snow? Perhaps even Lady Sansa will resurface from the Vale, where she's been hiding as Elaine Stone. The Manderlys are an ancient family that once inhabited the region surrounding the river Mander. The Mander is the largest river in the Reach, and the Manderlys used to rule near it. Being an ancient house, the Manderlys are possibly ancestors of Garth Greenhand, a mythical figure in Westerosi history, who was a High King of the First Men thousands of years ago, whose son, Garth the Gardener, founded House Gardener and the Kingdom of the Reach. The Manderlys ruled a castle called Dunstanbury, and had a fierce rivalry with House Peake of Starpike. When the Andals invaded Westeros, either 6, 4, or 2,000 years ago, depending on who you believe, the Manderlys converted to the faith of the Seven like the rest of the South, instead of keeping the old gods. This means that in present day, the Manderlys are the only northern house who worship the Seven. They're also one of the few northern houses to grant knighthoods, since becoming a knight is tied to the faith of the Seven. When the Gardeners were the kings of the Reach, there was a prestigious order of knights called the Order of the Green Hand, which the Manderlys still claim membership of despite living in the north. The feud between House Manderly and House Peake rose once again during the last years of the vain King Garth Gardener X. As a senile old man, King Garth had fathered no sons, and only daughters. One daughter was married to Lord Manderly, and another married to Lord Peake. Both Manderly and Peake argued that their wife should become Queen of the Reach once Garth should die, and themselves king consort. This rivalry was marked by betrayal, conspiracy, and murder, finally escalating into open war. Other lords joined both sides, and the Storm King and the King of the Rock capitalized on the war and seized land in the Reach, while Dornish raids began to plague the country. Dornish raiders slit King Garth's throat and sacked Highgarden. After a decade of anarchy, the High Steward of Highgarden, Sir Osmond Tyrell, gathered up the other lords of the Reach and defeated both the Manderlys and the Peakes, thus reclaiming the ruined Highgarden and placing King Garth's second cousin Mern on the throne, becoming King Mern Gardener VI, who would slowly begin to rebuild the war-torn Reach. All we know about the exile of House Manderly is that at some point they overreached themselves, and the Gardeners drove them from the kingdom. Maester Yandel, the in-universe character who wrote The World of Ice and Fire, says the Manderlys were exiled not by the King of the Reach, who was Perceon Gardener III at this time, but instead they were driven into exile by Lord Lormor Peake at the behest of King Perceon, who feared the Manderlys' growing influence and power in the Reach. The Reach is the second largest kingdom in Westeros, behind only the North, but far, far more populous and resource-rich. The internal power systems must have been constantly evolving before Aegon's conquest, since there existed so many different powerful houses. Some houses, like the Hightowers of Oldtown, and perhaps even the Manderlys of Dunstonbury, rivaled the strength of their gardener overlords. Meanwhile, the Tyrells were the stewards of Highgarden, playing in the shadows for their chance at power. With the Manderlys exiled from the Reach, the balance of power would shift more comfortably into the hands of the gardeners of Highgarden. The Peakes were then awarded the castle and lands of Dunstonbury, as the Manderlys scrambled north. The Manderlys settled at the Wolf's Den, an ancient castle of the north located on the coast of the White Knife River, guarding the north from potential invaders from the Bight and the Shivering Sea. The Wolf's Den was raised by King Jon Stark thousands and thousands of years ago, and became the seat of brothers, cousins, and younger sons of the Stark kings of the north. Eventually, a cadet branch of House Stark, called House Grey Stark, ruled the Wolf's Den for 500 years, but went extinct after rebelling against the Starks alongside the Boltons. The Wolf's Den changed ownership often throughout the history of the North, at times being held by the Flints, the Locks, and even the Arryns during the wars between the North and the Vale. When the feeble and elderly King Edric Stark was unable to defend his kingdom, slavers from the Stepstones captured the Wolf's Den, but they were eventually defeated by Edric's great-grandson, King Brandon Ice Eyes Stark, who hung the slavers' entrails amongst the branches of weirwood trees as an offering to the old gods. Wylla Manderly, Lord Wyman's granddaughter, says that 1,000 years before the conquest, a promise was made, and oaths were sworn in the Wolf's Den before the old gods and the new. When we were sore beset and friendless, hounded from our homes and in peril of our lives, the wolves took us in and nourished us, and protected us against our enemies. The city is built upon the land they gave us. In return, we swore that we would always be their men, Stark men. 1,000 years before the conquest is the most commonly purported date of the Manderlys' exile, though Lord Godric Borrell says it occurred no more than 900 years ago. So the Manderlys arrived at the Wolf's Den somewhere between 1,300 years ago and 900 years ago, or between 1000 BC and 600 BC. The Starks gave the Wolf's Den to the Manderlys so that region of the north could be protected from the invasions that had plagued it for millennia. Over the centuries, the Manderlys used their wealth from the Reach to raise the great city of White Harbor around the Wolf's Den, building Newcastle in the place of the Wolf's Den, which is now used as White Harbor's prison. White Harbor was the newest city in Westeros until Aegon built King's Landing. Newcastle was built to resemble Dunstonbury, having similarities to the architecture of the south, not the north. Now, White Harbor is the 5th largest city in Westeros, and the primary trading port of the north. The Lord of House Manderly during A Song of Ice and Fire is Wyman Manderly. Wyman is about 60 years old, having grown up during the reign of Aegon V Targaryen, and he fought at the Battle of the Trident for Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. Wyman has a massive belly, and is appropriately nicknamed Lord Too Fat to Sit a Horse by Stannis Baratheon. His enormous size and subtle personality make many people believe Lord Wyman to be a craven, but that is a clever front. Lord Wyman Manderly is one of the most significant players in the Game of Thrones, secretly plotting against the Boltons and Lannisters from within White Harbor, all the while appearing friendly to the Freys and Roose Bolton. The first time we hear mention of Wyman Manderly is in Book 1, after Ned Stark begins to anticipate conflict with the Lannisters. He tells Catelyn to instruct Lord Wyman to strengthen the defenses of White Harbor, which he has done. In Book 5, we learn that Wyman is discreetly harboring warships that they have been building. When King Robb Stark calls his banners in Book 1, Wyman stays behind to defend White Harbor, but sends his 2 sons, Willis and Wendell, south to fight the Lannisters. Willis is captured by Tywin Lannister at the Battle of the Green Fork, and spends the majority of the story in Harrenhal as a prisoner. Wendell was with King Robb at the Red Wedding, and died alongside his king. In Book 5, Davos Seaworth goes to White Harbor to negotiate House Manderly support for King Stannis. Wyman Manderly is hosting 3 members of House Frey, and has made a deal with the Lannisters. In exchange for the safe return of his son Willis, Lord Wyman will marry one of Walder Frey's daughters, and Wyman's granddaughters, Winifred and Willa, will marry Rhaegar Frey and little Walder Frey, respectively. To appear loyal in front of the Freys, Wyman has Davos apprehended and sentenced to death. One more piece of his deal with the Lannisters is that Wyman must execute Davos Seaworth. Sneaky Lord Manderly sends Davos to jail in the Wolf's Den, and instead executes a criminal who looks like him, since, as Wyman says, "You have a common face, Lord Davos." In exchange, Cersei sends Jaime to send Wylis Manderly back home to White Harbor. During the welcoming feast celebrating Willis's return, Wyman sneaks away and has a secret meeting with Davos, using the excuse of a long trip to the bathroom. He tells Davos that the way he treated him in the Merman's court was a mummer's farce put on to please our friends of Frey. He says that his granddaughter Willa reminded him of the debt White Harbor owes to the Starks of Winterfell, a debt that can never be repaid. He also mentions a letter he received from Tywin Lannister regarding his son Wylis. "If I would have him freed unharmed," he told me, "I must repent my treason, yield my city, declare my loyalty to the boy king on the Iron Throne, and bend my knee to Roose Bolton, his Warden of the North. Should I refuse, Wylis would die a traitor's death, White Harbor would be stormed and sacked, and my people would suffer the same fate as the Rains of Castamere." So Wyman fake executed Davos and agreed to the marriage alliances. The Freys inside White Harbor watch Lord Manderly day and night, sniffing for a whiff of treachery. The arrogant Sir Jared Frey, and his nephew Rhaegar, the fool who wears a dragon's name. Lord Wyman can't even trust his maester, who was born a Lannister of Lannisport. Wyman goes on to give one of the most badass monologues in A Song of Ice and Fire. "Foes and false friends are all around me, Lord Davos. They infest my city like roaches, and at night I feel them crawling over me. My son Wendell came to the twins a guest. He ate Lord Walder's bread and salt, and hung his sword upon the wall to feast with friends. And they murdered him, murdered, I say, and may the Freys choke upon their fables. I drink with Jared, jape with Simon, promise Rhaegar the hand of my own beloved granddaughter, but never think that means I have forgotten. The North remembers, Lord Davos. The North remembers, and the mummer's farce is almost done. My son is home." Manderly says the young wolf is dead, but Robb was not Lord Eddard's only son. He brings in a boy called Wex Pike, a mute Ironborn, who was Theon Greyjoy's squire before Ramsay Snow sacked Winterfell and took Theon hostage. Wex followed Osha, Rickon, and Shaggy Dog as they secretly traversed the north, and discovered that they left the mainland and sailed to the island of Skagos. Wex was found and brought to White Harbor, where they taught him how to read and write so he could communicate all he'd seen. When brought into the room before Wyman Manderly, Davos Seaworth, and Robert Glover, Wex places Robert's dagger over Skagos on Manderly's map, revealing the location of Rickon Stark, the last known heir to the north. Lord Manderly says that if Davos meets his price, he can deliver King Stannis the allegiance of White Harbor and all the lands east of the White Knife. Manderly's price? Rickon Stark. "It's not a king I need, but a smuggler," Manderly says. "Smuggle me back my liege lord, and I will take Stannis Baratheon as my king." Davos believes the North would rise for Rickon Stark, and this could be his way to deliver the North to King Stannis. So Davos agrees, and in the Winds of Winter, we should see Davos finding Rickon on Skagos, where the young prince may have grown wild and rowdy. The folk of Skagos, while not technically wildlings, are closer to wildlings than Northmen in their culture. The Skagosi are isolated, are rumored to still perform sacrifices before weirwood trees, and still practice the outlawed tradition of First Night according to Roose Bolton, in which a lord can sleep with any bride the first night of her marriage. Rickon is also a warg, and being only 5 years old, he doesn't understand self-control when it comes to skin changing, whereas that's all Bran has been learning. So we'll see what kind of feral condition Rickon Stark is in once Davos retrieves him. After Davos and Wyman speak, Wyman leaves White Harbor for Winterfell to attend the wedding of Ramsay Bolton and Arya Stark, who is of course Jane Poole, the childhood friend of Sansa who was mistaken for Arya. Before he leaves, Manderly gives each of his Frey guests a gift, a palfrey. While it is common for northern hosts to present guest gifts, the secret meaning here is that Jared, Rhaegar, and Symond Frey are no longer protected by guest right. On the journey north, the Freys go missing. Lord Wyman says they rode ahead of him because he is too fat and slow. Ramsay believes Wyman may have killed them, but he adds, the world won't miss a few Freys, which is the most base thing to ever come out of his mouth. Wyman pretends to be distraught over the Freys' disappearance, but Roose Bolton is suspicious. He doesn't trust Lord Manderly, and only eats food once Manderly eats it first, fearing poison. During the wedding feast, Wyman gets drunk, and he tells the singer Abel, who is actually Mance Rayder in disguise, to sing the song of the Rat Cook. The Rat Cook was a cook at the Night Fort, the castle which used to be the base of the Night's Watch. The watch was visited by an Andal king, either King Tywell Lannister II or King Oswell Arryn I. The Rat Cook served the Andal king a pie made of bacon, and chopped up bits of the king's own son. The pie tasted so good, the king asked for a second piece. As legend has it, the Rat Cook was turned into a monstrous rat that was forced to only eat its own young. However, the Rat Cook wasn't punished because he murdered the king's son, or because he made the king into a cannibal. He was punished for breaking the old god's rule of guest right, since he killed a guest beneath his roof. Wyman Manderly is no longer beholden to guest right with the Freys. As he leaves the feast, and as Abel sings a song about guest right, Lord Wyman personally serves Roose Bolton and Hostine and Aenys Frey pieces of pie. Many readers believe that Wyman murdered those 3 Freys who went missing, Jared, Symond, and Rhaegar, and cooked their flesh into these pies, which Hostine and Aenys Frey eat, thus getting revenge against the Freys for his son Wendell's murder at the Red Wedding. As he serves them, Wyman says, "The best pie you have ever tasted, my lords. Wash it down with arbor gold, and savor every bite. I know I shall." Game of Thrones gave a nod to this theory in Season 6, when Arya bakes Lothar and Black Walder Frey into a pie and feeds it to Lord Walder before slitting his throat, thus avenging her brother Robb's death at the Red Wedding. As Book 5 draws to a close, the North experiences a nasty blizzard. On the battlements of Winterfell, a dozen snowmen were built in the form of various lords of the North. Most notably, there is a fat snowman who is obviously Wyman Manderly, as well as a snow lady who is likely Barbary Dustin, a one-armed snowman who is likely Harwood Stout, and a snowman with an icicle beard depicting Horsebane Umber. These 4 lords support House Bolton, but we know that Roose Bolton is a suspicious, cunning man, and already doesn't trust Lord Wyman. He also believes Horsebane Umber to be plotting betrayal, and during the wedding feast, he is quietly talking with Harwood Stout, perhaps plotting betrayal. We read earlier that Stout is upset with Ramsay for depleting the winter stores of food. Stout also leads the search party when Jared, Symond, and Rhaegar Frey go missing. He returns empty-handed, but maybe he knew Wyman killed the Freys, and didn't say anything. Barbary Dustin hates Ramsay because she believes he killed her nephew, Domeric Bolton, and holds a grudge against the Freys because she had family at the Red Wedding with Robb. So Lady Dustin's loyalties to Roose Bolton are uncertain. In the Pink Letter, Ramsay tells Jon that your false king's friends are dead, their heads upon the walls of Winterfell. Come see them, bastard. Some readers believe that Stannis' friends are the snowmen upon the walls of Winterfell, Wyman Manderly, Barbary Dustin, Horsebane Umber, and Harwood Stout, who have been plotting behind Roose Bolton's back to support the false king, Stannis the Manus. This detail about Stannis' friends supports the idea of a grand northern conspiracy, a popular theory about the lords of the north conspiring to get revenge against the Boltons and the Freys. You've probably already heard about the Grand Northern Conspiracy, and you should really watch Alt-Shift-X's video on it if you haven't before. He makes my videos look like a disfigured loaf of bread that Hot Pie baked. So Wyman and the Lords of the North want a Stark restoration. They don't know Bran is alive, and presumably only Wyman Manderly, Robert Glover, and Davos Seaworth know Rickon is on Skagos, and everyone is about to find out that Jon Snow has been murdered at Castle Black. Most everyone believes the Arya Stark that Ramsay married is the real Arya, though we know it was Jane Poole, who has now escaped with Theon and is in Stannis' camp. Sansa's whereabouts are unknown to the world, but we know she is hiding as Elaine Stone in the Vale. It's fair to assume the Northern Lords would not support the son of fake Arya and Ramsay, or the son of Sansa and Tyrion, should one have existed. Some people think Jane Westerling may have been able to carry Robb's child, but that's unlikely, since her mother was giving her moon tea to prevent pregnancy. Rickon and Jon are the two best candidates for a Stark restoration in the eyes of the Northern Lords. Wyman is already taking care of Rickon, and since he is only 5 years old, Lord Manderly may act as his regent and rule in Winterfell until Rickon comes of age. However, Jon Snow will be resurrected in the Winds of Winter, and his time with the Night's Watch will eventually come to a close. In Book 3, before King Robb died at the Red Wedding, he hosted a council in which he decreed his bastard brother Jon Snow should be legitimized and considered his heir. Robb wanted Jon to succeed him as King Jon Stark if he should die without having a child. Robb sends this information to Howland Reed in the Neck via Mage Mormont and Galbert Glover. Edmure Tully witnessed Robb's will as well, and we learn in Book 4 that 2 knights of House Tully, Sir Desmond Grell and Sir Robin Ryger, join the Night's Watch after Jaime takes Riverrun. Some readers believe Edmure told Grell and Ryger to take the Black and inform Jon Snow about Robb's will, that he should be king in the north. The general outline for the Grand Northern Conspiracy is that the Northern Lords are waiting for Stannis and Roose Bolton to fight and wipe out each other's armies, and then raise up either Jon Snow or Rickon Stark as the new king in the north. However, as Alt-Shift-X concludes in his video, there isn't likely one grand conspiracy, but rather several conspiracies across the giant country of the north. If so, there are likely 3 factions. The first faction are the Old North, who might support Jon Snow. They include houses like Mormont, Umber, Flint, Norrie, Glover, etc. Torgon Flint and Brandon Norrie even visit Castle Black and walk atop the wall with Jon, and they seem unsure of Jon's plan to settle the wildlings in the Gift. These lords are pledged to Stannis, but once the battle is over, it's likely they'll stay in the north to support Jon as king in the north, rather than ride south with Stannis should he survive his conflict with the Boltons. Of course, Jon may win the support of the entire north if he manages to kill Ramsay should Stannis fail, like in Game of Thrones. There's lots of ways for Jon to become Lord/King in the north. Robb's will should give him a political claim. His status as the last known son of Ned Stark should give him a blood claim. His resurrection and general badassery should give him a cool guy claim. The second faction are the New North. The New North are the Manderlys and their bannermen, who support Rickon, the legitimate heir to Winterfell, since Jon's a bastard, a dead bastard, and Bran is missing. Installing Rickon in Winterfell allows Manderly to gain power as his regent, and we know Wyman is fairly power-hungry. He plotted in Book 2 to marry the widow Donella Hornwood, his cousin, in order to merge the Hornwood land into White Harbor territory. That didn't happen though. Ramsay married her, locked her in a tower, and she starved to death. The third faction are the Vale, or rather, the Knights of the Vale, who would support Sansa. This would be Peter Baelish, the Lord Protector of the Eyrie, commanding his knights to take Winterfell for Sansa, and he would likely try to marry Sansa as well, thus becoming Lord of Winterfell. The Knights of the Vale did initially want to join Robb in the War of the Five Kings, so they would probably be happy to restore Winterfell to a Stark. If Baelish makes a play for Winterfell with Sansa, it will likely be long after the dust settles between Stannis and the Boltons, since Baelish isn't the type to get his hands dirty with battle. And by that time, Jon or Rickon may already be installed in Winterfell. Essentially, I believe Wyman Manderly is using Stannis to defeat the Boltons, and using Davos to provide the Stark for his Stark restoration. By the end of the Winds of Winter, the Boltons and Freys will be severely weakened, and the Manderly should be on the rise once again, under either Rickon Stark or Jon Snow as their Lord of Winterfell. Or who knows, maybe the Night King will find a dragon in a lake and use it to turn all the Manderlys into blue puddles. Let me know your thoughts on the Starks and the Grand Northern Conspiracy in the comments. Thanks for watching and subscribing.